Okay, hello everyone. My name is André. I hope you are having a great time at Brighton. Today I will present you an audio talk about our pipeline for Farming Simulator. But first, let's talk a little bit about Giant Software. So Giant Software is a developer and publisher, and we are mainly known by our Farming Simulator series. So in this talk, we go about creating authentic sound for Farming Simulator, and we go over 4 topics. We have dynamic ambient audio system, we have sound design for animations, vehicle audio recording, and load simulation. Okay, let's start with the ambience. When we release a game, the base game normally comes with 3 maps. Every map normally represents a different region of the world. Currently, we have US, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and if you saw the trailer of Farming Simulator 25, we'll have Asia as well. After that, we release more DLCs, and normally we release more maps. So in this case, we have 2 maps here, and we have one from the US, and we have one from France. Each map has different locations, has different fauna, has different conditions, so we need different ambiences for each one. I will play 2 ambiences. First, we will start with the US. Oopsie. Let's go here. Okay, just a small snippet, very chill. You are in the farm, it's summer, nothing special. And then we have, for France, so you can hear some kids in the village. You will hear different types of birds. And how do we do the ambiences? So our ambiences are built up to 2D sounds. So we have 2D beds. Then we have one-shot 2D sounds. And for some locations, we have 3D sounds. And I will explain you why we cannot rely too much on 3D sounds. And this is actually a challenge that we are trying to overcome. But I will explain a little bit more over the presentation. Okay, so the beautiful thing you see on the top is called XML, because at Giant Software, we use our own tools. So we have our own engine and even audio tools. And we use these to implement the sounds. And I will explain a little bit. I know it's really not beautiful to look at. But so let's look at here. And we have, first, we are basically making reference to the sound we want to play. We can add multiple variations, as you can see here, and then we have different parameters that we can trigger, that we can use for that sound. So volume, I think, is quite easy to understand what it means. Pitch scale is a pitch shift. Fades, so we can have like a fade in and a fade out. Retrigger time, this is an important part for us, and that's one advantage of using our own engine, because we have a running timer during the game, and we can do very specific times. So we can really use like, okay, we want this sound to play from like 20 seconds to 800 seconds, for example. And the retrigger time is basically that. So the sound plays, and you will only play again during that interval that we define. Audio group is a simple thing. So we basically associate certain sounds to different audio groups. Then the player can, on the settings, just change the volume of those audio groups. Indoor and outdoor volume, I think, are quite clear what they mean. So if the player is indoor, we can have different volume. If the player is outdoor, we can have different volume as well. Probability. Does anybody here use WISE or Fmod? Okay. So basically, think about a random container in WISE, and what we have is we can give probabilities for the different sounds that they will play. So if you have like 4 sounds, maybe we want to play this sound a little bit more, not this one so much, so we can just have different probabilities. Loops, so we can say how many times the sound will loop, or if it will loop forever, or required prevent. This is like one of the most important for us, because if you think, I don't know if any of you already played the game, but for example, we have seasons, we have time of day, so it's really like seconds running, and we can, for example, say required forest and autumn, which means that that sound only can play if both things are true. So the player's in a forest and the player in its autumn. Prevent works in a different way. We can give a lot of values for prevent. For example, don't play in winter, don't play in forest, don't play in summer, don't play, I don't know, like during the morning. And if the engine finds any of those values, immediately will not play the sound. We also have, it's not here, the minimum and max time of day, which means we can be very, very specific for a sound to play. So to give you a specific example, we have industry, right? So we can have different factories in a game. And I can say, okay, this specific sub-factory can start the idle sound at 9 a.m. and shut down at 7 p.m. So that's one of the things that we also have. Okay. Let's go after. For the info layer, so we also use the info layer that allow us to paint different regions of the map. And for these different regions, we can attach certain 2D sounds. This is very important for us because we can have a map with an arbor, city, village, or even different types of fields, so we can just paint them. However, we need to be careful here because the player has a super high degree of customization. So it can just go there and you have a field and suddenly has an industrial area. Or then he destroys that and he builds a forest. Or he does whatever. So we normally tend to use these for areas that are non-destructive, like cities, arbors, or villages, so things that the player cannot modify. So as you see here, allowed to choose between different areas or different fields. We have open land, city, village, arbor, industrial, near water or no water. So we can also have like 2D sounds attached to close to water or not close to water. For water specifically, for example, we have a map that's the forestry map. And on that map, we have a big river with a lot of branches. And we use the splines, naturally, like, I don't know, we probably know how the splines work for audio, but so we have, like, imagine a line that goes through the river, and we have a 3D sound source attached there that will follow the player. So in that sense, we will save on memory, and we can upgrade the things. So related to the 3D sounds, here you can see part of our engine, and you can see all the red spheres here. So those are 3D sounds. That's a location that cannot be modified. That's why we are using them. And 3D sounds can only be used in non-destructive areas. So as you can see here, city, port, towns, and others. Some assets can have a 3D sound object associated with them. And this is, for example, as one feature that our game has is you can build an industry, right? As I give the previous example, a soup factory. So when you build a soup factory, the 3D sound source is already attached to that asset. We also have that for animals and other things. The main issue, again, here with the 3D sources, is the degree of customization. To give you an example, we have a 3D source in a tree, and the player goes there and cuts the tree. Suddenly, you have a bird singing on that tree, but it's no tree there. So we need to be very careful with that. And currently, our engine doesn't support the procedural placement of 3D sounds, but these is features that we are working for the future. Okay, which parameters can we change? So we have range and inner range. So if you think about the sphere, inner range, if the player is inside the inner range, you will not have any attenuation. If it's outside, so if it's still in the sphere, but outside of the inner range, you'll start having attenuation. Then we have the volume loop, that's clear. Random can act as two things. So random we can use if we have like a container, again, for people that know WiseNF mod, of different sounds. And we activate random and loop. The engine goes there and it will loop sound. It will loop, but it will always trigger a different sound. It's continuing looping, but with different sounds. If we deactivate random, the engine just chooses one file and will be looping that file until the player leaves the sphere. Then when he enters, the engine will choose a different file. So then we have also the random for min and max delay will activate. So if we have the sphere and we don't have that active, the player enters and the sound starts playing immediately. But with the random, we can specify these values so it takes some delay until the sound starts playing again when the player is inside the sphere. Finally, priority. This is important for our programmers because there's always a little bit discussion with memory usage for audio. So we can, for all the 3D sources, we can give them different values in memory. So if they have a high priority, they need to be prioritized over other things or low. And here you can see we have basically a container of different sound sources. On this side, we have start of day. So again, we can specify the minutes, the day of the year. So imagine like we have Christmas or we have some event happening in Christmas. We can specify that day for a sound play only there. And then we have weather. So we have different weathers from rain, from hail, from sun, cloudy, and we can say when the sound should play. Okay, now I will give you an example of 3D sound sources that we use because our maps have some areas that are a little bit static, so we need to give life to those areas and we give them with 3D sounds. And we need to kind of hide or put the 3D sounds in the distance. And here is an example. So just a bicycle in a city passing by. Some construction work. Some kids having fun and probably the mother running around them, but that's a different one. Oops. Okay. So before I jump to animation sounds, I also want to tell you something we need to have in mind because it already happened. So this game normally is Peggy 3. So we have all kind of players playing the game. And we have kids. So me and my colleague Niels once had the idea, okay, for the French map, we have normally a typical siren for the fireman, and this should play, right? Fine. We put the siren, ship the game. Sometime over, like a letter came in, hey, my son really loves the game, but he's so afraid of the siren that he stopped playing the game. So we needed to take the siren out of the game. So we always need to be careful when we are doing these things, when we are designing. We need to think for who we are designing. Same thing recently with, like, for example, putting a pack of wolves in the forest, right? Certain maps have wolves, actually. Are the kids happy with that? That's the main question. Okay, then let's go to the animation sounds. For the animation sounds, our game has around 400 vehicles and attachments in total. Here you can see some of the attachments. So we have from harvesters, trailers, cultivators, seeders, stone picker, and attachments work mainly with animations. So here I have an example of one animation, and I will explain you how our timeline works. Let me just play the video for you. Okay, so each attachment is composed by many different parts, and those parts form different animations. So here you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 animations. The one that we are working here is the pipe animation. So it's that thing that fold in the beginning. That's basically where the vegetables are coming out of the harvester. And all these are the sounds that are being triggered during that animation. So normally here where you see more like the black part is like the sound is being triggered over there, and normally those are hydraulics, long sounds, and all the others are impacts. So each of these animations have multiple sounds going on. Let me show you another thing. Also, sorry, to still come here, you also heard about the work sounds. So after we unfold the animation, you had like the rotating parts, and those were working. So basically we have start, work, and stop sounds for these. So each attachment will have their own. And also you hear a PTO. When the camera was close to the tractor, you have kind of like imagine an LFO, something that was vibrating there. That's the PTO, which means it's the tractor that's giving energy to the attachment to work. However, the PTO is not an animation. It's another type of sound that we can attach directly to the tractor. Oh, okay, again, our friend XML. So here you can imagine one animation from that entire machine, and all these sounds are being triggered during that animation. So if we have 5, 6, 7, 8 animations, each one will have the sounds related to them. Things that we will use as parameters will be start time and end time, so when the sound should start and when the sound should end. Direction, so as you see on the timeline, if the machine is folding or if the machine is unfolding, so we have -1 or 1. Pitch scale, so just changing the pitch if we want for a specific sound. Fade, this is quite important in the animations, because when we have multiple sounds of hydraulics playing, we really need to manage to fade between them. Start and end pitch scale, this means when we have, imagine again the hydraulic example, we have one playing from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. So we can say to the pitch to change over the course of that time in a positive way or in a negative way. Then we have volume going on, link node. So link node is each attachment has different parts, so we can attach a sound. So these are 3D sounds to a very specific part of the attachment. And the link node offset is sometimes you want the sound to be not just on that link node, but a little bit offset. Okay. And here I will show you one example of one or probably the most complex attachment we have in the game. And here is just the unfolding part. These has really many parts going on and many different animations. Okay, that was just the unfolding. And then you have the bale wrapping, then you have like making the bales, collecting the bales, folding, open different parts is really a huge attachment. And now we will go to the vehicle recording. So for vehicles, we have around 300 vehicles in the game. We probably have more now with the new FS25. And here you can see a bunch of tractors, but we also have trucks, harvesters, and now even motorcycles. So how do we go to record the tractor? The tractor have 5 components that we always want to get. The engine, the exhaust, that's where the bass normally comes from, transmission, fan, and cabin. So for you to have an example of each one, here is the engine. Here is the exhaust. Yeah. Transmission is basically an airplane crashing. Fan. Very present in modern machines because they use a lot of filtering in there for regulation. So you basically hear the fan. And cabin. Again, cabin is very different from old machines to new machines. Old machines, it basically doesn't exist a cabin there. You are there and you hear everything outside. New machines is quite relaxing. Oops. Sorry here. Yeah, okay. It seems that he wants to pass. Okay, passed. So let's go to the first part of the recording, stationary. So we record first the tractor, just like stop, and just the RPMs of the tractor. That was the old method that we used. So we put some mic stands, we go around finding the spots that we want, then put the mics. The new method, so we bought a lot of new material, and that's there, and I will explain you why we are changing methods in a moment. Okay. Also, when the tractor is stationary, we can use a dynamometer. This basically simulates the tractor under pressure. And I will show you one example in a future slide where you can hear the normal voice of the tractor. So it's just going around super chill. And then when it's under pressure. So he has literally two different sounds. Then we go to driving. So after we record the tractor in place, we go driving. And here is where our new method really comes in handy. Because before we have the mic stands, then we go driving, we need to take the mics, we need to attach the mics, find ways to attach mics that were not so small, and hope that nothing falls, right? With the new ones, we are mainly changed to DPAs, and we can attach them and all, like they go everywhere basically. They are really small mics. They resist a lot of sound pressure. That's really good for us, and also heat resistance up to a certain point. So we basically have them already like in our stationary recording, and then we go to the driving with them already. So we can transition super fast between them. The final stage of recording will be additional sounds. So each machine has their own honk, has their own beeps on the cabin, even like some mechanical parts, or Antonio Carraro, for example, they have some metal plates on the back that just shake a lot when the tractor is driving and give them a unique sound. So we try to capture all of this with the shotgun mic. And finally, recording gear. So currently we are using 16 channels of audio to record the tractor. We use, for the mix pre-10, we normally put the engine and the exhaust there. So we use more than one mic. Normally it's like between 3 and 4 for the engine, depending how complex the situation is there. And for the exhaust, also 2 or 3. For the F8, we tend to put the ambisonics mic there for the cabin and all the other parts that we need from transmission to fan. Here are our DPAs. So we have the DPAs 4061 and 4062. As I said, they are very good because of their small size. They are very resistant to high sound pressure level, and they also handle some resistance. Yes, we did this beautiful protection to the mics because it's needed. And finally, for the recording gear. For the recording gear, again, with the mics, they are omnidirectional. The mics that we were using before were not. So we had a proximity effect, and we want to avoid that. We want to have the cleanest possible sound when we record the tractor. So another thing you can ask yourselves, oh, but then you are having other sounds like entering in the mic. The main thing is the tractor is so loud. They are so crazy loud that it doesn't matter what's there. It's just cutting the thing that we are pointing on, and that's close. So, how many do we need? Some. Right? Okay. Then we have the ambisonics mic. Currently, our engine doesn't support ambisonics. However, we record the cabin in ambisonics, so we can then downmix it, take the channels that we want, and we will implement them in the cabin as mono sources. One of the difficult parts of recording tractors compared to cars is this right here. So in a car, you normally have the engine, the exhaust, I'm sorry, on the bottom, right? And you have a plastic around. So it's more or less easier to put the mics. On the tractor, you have the engine in the front, and then you have a tube that goes really high, normally with the material that gets really hot, and we need normally to get this area of the exhaust. So what we use? We use some protection against fire, naturally. We need to find specific places to point to the exhausts, to put the mics the closest as possible without burning them. Already happened before, so we don't want to burn the DPAs. And another thing is we normally just use zip tie or professional tape to try to put the mics the closest as possible. One important aspect to recording the exhaust is trying to avoid the direct sound that's coming out of the exhaust, because there you are just getting wind. What we want is the bass, and normally the bass will be using the off-axis position of the mics. We are also using a Shure SM57. It normally has a good frequency response around the 200 to 500, so we also use it mainly for exhaust. And finally, we go to analysis and simulation of the load sounds. So, as I said before, tractor has two main sounds, offload and onload. Let's start with the offload. Okay, you can imagine more or less relaxing. Is almost like a YouTube video with rain, but it's fine. Then we have onload. So here the tractor is under pressure, and it triggers this second voice. How do we get this voice? As I said before, we already record these voices, and then we use our plugin FabFilter Pro Q, and we use the EQ match. So for the EQ match, what we do is we load both sounds, so offload and onload, and we get the difference of those sounds. So the white curve that you see here is the difference between those sounds. And then we can simulate, so we get the EQ curve corresponding to that analysis, and we have this. And from here, we export the values to our programmers that will put them here. Okay, so this is our own loop synthesis tool, and I will give you like just a brief overview. So here we import the audios after the treatment, so after we edit them. So for the engine and the exhaust, for example, we mix them together. Then here will be the simulation where we can test, and there is basically the modulation tab. So we can apply load to the engine, load to the exhausts, and also have like a start and stopping sound. Let's go through it. So first thing first, we have the different load factor points, 0 to 30, 60, 80, and 100, and minus 100 if the tractor is just going downhill. So no pressure there. And we have an equalizer. So for each factor point, we can have a preset for the equalizer. So we can have, for example, for 0 will be nothing. Then for 30, we have already a difference in certain frequencies, 60, another different one, 80, and 100. So for you to see a real-life example. Okay. So 0 starts like this. Okay. So we have different EQs already to simulate the load. The next thing will be the distortion. So, oops. So for the distortion, we have a multiband distortion, and here we can apply distortion to the low band, mid band, and the high band. Distortion is super important because we want to give that aggressiveness to the tractor. So another example. And finally, the LFO. In our case, this LFO works more or less as a distortion. So we also have an LFO for different factor points. Okay. And the last part, implementing all this into our game. Again, let's go to the XML. So after we export our GLS tool, so our synthesis tool, what you see here is the implementation on a series M7 Kubota tractor. And what we have is, so for example, for the engine and the exhaust, we are just modifying the value. And we are modifying the value depending of the speed of the tractor. So we have volume, the outdoor will be this one, and then we have like different values for different speeds and the modification that will happen to the volume there. Then we have the transmission, we use two, so one for each wheel. And then here we are changing a lot of things. So for the volume, we are taking the speed again, we are taking the motor load, and we are taking the driving direction. So if the tractor is going forward or if the tractor is going backwards. Normally you hear more the transmission if the tractor is going backwards. We are also modifying the pitch with the suspension value we get from the game. So how much is the seat of the driver's jumping and the driving direction. Again, it corresponds if it's going forward or back. Then here we have like the differential speed, and I will show you on the next one. That will be easier for you. Okay, so for the fan, we don't want the fan to work as like an RPM, so you get an effect. So we can actually change here for the fan just to take the speed into account. So the fan will grow over like instead of having like the effect of an RPM. Again, then here we are changing the volume. For the cabin as well, we have different values. And finally, I will show you, let me just see here. Transmission already there. Sorry. I will show you one example with all of these implemented. Cabin sound, cabin rumble. Yeah, and some tractors have that compressed air that you hear in the end. So, what are the challenges that we are facing currently? As I told you, the game is quite big and it has a lot of machines, and currently we are a team of 2 people, so we need to have a fast workflow and prioritizing what the game needs. Then we have feature development. Here, one important thing is about how long it takes to have the features developed, because we use our own tools and we need to be in contact with the programmers, test things, explain. The advantage here is we can be very specific in what we want to use for our game. So as you saw, for the vehicles, for example, we have an in-depth system for them. Then we have high degree of terrain customization. That's one of the challenges that we are facing currently. That's the use of the 3D sound sources, and because the player can change a lot the terrain. Reliance on 2D sounds. We are changing that for the 3D. We are developing features on that. And you probably have in your mind, so why don't you use Wise or Fmod, and it will be everything easier? One main issue is the game has a huge modding community, huge. So they can really go in depth and create their own audio systems and all. The problem is Wise allows modding, but to a certain point. So more like changing sounds in the game and not developing like entire systems. So this is the thing that we need to have into consideration. And again, development priorities. So when the game was founded or started, like a lot was focused on the machines itself. So that was also for the audio team to focus on that first. And then we are exporting that for the environment now. So we are also like expanding on the environment, UI, and all the other sounds in the game. So thank you for watching. You can try our loop synthesis tool on that link if you want, and I'm open for questions.
Anyone have a question?
Any questions?
Hi, sorry. I'm not sure if you mentioned it in the talk, but how are you handling the sounds inside the cabin? I played the game, and when you switch to that cabin view, you have this kind of rattling and rustling of the plastics and what feels like the interior is moving with the terrain. I was wondering how much that is attached to the terrain that you're going over, or if it's just a predetermined loop that just kind of gives you the feeling of the terrain changing the sound.
Yeah. Okay, so for the cabin, we have two things. We also use the GLS to simulate inside of the cabin the sounds, and then we have the indoor cabin rumble, so what you make reference for. So that basically is already, we talk with our programmers, and they take a reference of the speed of the tractor to trigger certain one-shot sounds for the indoor cabin rumble. More questions?
Hi.
Hi.
I have two questions. I might have missed the first bit, but
sorry, I need to ask you to speak a little bit
sorry,
louder.
I'll speak a bit clearer. I might have missed that the first bit. Am I right in thinking that the sounds are spatialized so that the player can experience it three-dimensionally?
Depends on the sounds. On the first part, I reference for the ambience, we are using a lot of 2D sound sources. However, we have a panning for them naturally, but then we have locations where we have 3D sound sources, so they have specialization. And this is only in locations that the player cannot change, because as I made reference before, we cannot procedurally generating 3D sound sources, or currently. I'm not saying that in the future, but currently we can. So for ambience specifically is relying more in the 2D sounds.
And then my second question was, sorry, I'm kind of a bit new to this, so
no
getting used to things being coded. Do you is there some way of like the sound not? I mean, I'm not saying that it does sound repetitive, but do you get a point where the engine sounds very much the same all the time?
The engine, no, for one reason. So first, you can change the perspective if you want to have like outdoor or indoor, and the players that we have, they are really into the sound of the tractor. Let's say we have players from all types, so we don't have a spectrum of players. It's quite wide. Sorry. And for example, if you're driving the car, you also like can get, you can use basically, you can use a loop base or you can use a granular system. Normally for cars, they tend to use it more the granular for very fast cars, but they also use the loop-based system. And in our case, it's been working great, and we never had a complaint like that. And each tractor normally has a different engine sound, so that helps, I guess.
So they're all unique.
Sorry?
They're all unique.
Yes. More or less in a sense, like, so as I told you, like, we have 300 machines. We go on the field to record a lot of them, but we cannot record everything. So for some that we cannot record, we go to see the specs of the engine, and then we try to find something that's more or less similar. We tend to have like exactly the same specs, and then we process using our plugins to have like a close sound of the real engine of that vehicle.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the sounds for driving over different terrains, like on the road or...
Good. Good question. So for the surface sounds, we have surface sounds, but that's one of the features that we are working on, especially for the wheels, because recording tractor wheels is a little bit of a challenge. As you can imagine, many of them are taller than me, so they can be really huge, but that's one of the features that we are working for future games, is the wheel sound, but we currently have the terrain sounds. And those are also on our own engine, so associated with a different type of terrain. So we have raycasting, detects what's on the bottom, and then we have sounds for them.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
My question ties into the first question a little bit about the cabin sounds.
Yeah.
Because you guys did record sounds from like with your own microphones, but you also kind of like during gameplay, you kind of need to hear the sounds from outside. I'm guessing with a low pass filter or something.
Yeah.
So is it layered?
Good question. So basically, as I show on the XML, we can have like, for example, let's say we have a very old tractor. The cabin filtering is very bad normally. So we can say, okay, if you are inside of the cabin, we can give a volume for the engine, because normally in new tractors we get that volume really low. You can hear a little bit, but the volume is quite low. In, for example, all the tractors, we just increase that volume so you can hear a little bit more the engine and the outside elements.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Hello there, and thank you for that great presentation. Well done, you. I was just wondering, is there any temptation from your side to go more artistically stylized, like in classical film foley, what you used to do, obviously, the old coconuts for the horses and stuff like that? Or do you just say, okay, we just have to get it as real as possible? Is there not like a slight desire to say, okay, let's make that a bit more like over the top for what it is?
So you say more for the environment, correct?
Not just for the overall stylized. Is there a point where you say, yeah, we just recorded the sound, but it's just not dramatic enough, let's tweak it a little bit? Or is it just like, that's a no-go?
Yeah. Okay, that's actually a tricky thing, because when you work with a simulation game, again, they are a simulation, but we don't want to be boring, right? Like just like having one-to-one, like real sounds, and that's it. So of course we give a little bit of stylized from our perspective, but nothing that comes too much. So it's always like a trade-off, even with the machines, for example. Naturally, we have players, probably very, very like niche of the player, that they know exactly how the tractor sounds, and it's like, oh, it doesn't sound like that. Yes, we know, but we also have a bunch of players that are not just tractor fans, and we need to think of that. So we give a little bit of a more stylized to the sound, naturally keeping the realism and as close as possible as the real machine, for example. So that also works for the environment. We record certain environments, and then we also use libraries naturally. So it's a mix.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool. Thank you. I think that's time now.
Okay. Thank you very much.